Okay, so this is our opening screen of BuildingWorks. The demonstration tonight, I'm going to do a simple sort of new build, and I'm going to be showing the drawing module and also simultaneously estimating. So the first thing I'm going to start off is by choosing the drawing page that I want. So excuse me, I have a variety of scales and a variety of page sizes, and you can have them with a title notes block. So if you are doing an initial design yourself that you're going to be presenting to a client or for building control, etc., you could do it with a notes block. If you are importing a third party's drawing that you want to trace over for costing or takeoff purposes, then you would probably use a plain page. Now for demo purposes, I'm going to just going to use a plain page just to keep it a little bit cleaner on the screen. Now the next thing we do is, before we go into drawing, we have to choose our labour productivity profile, which of course affects the estimating costs. So the new build is all with standard build speeds, and then with the extension and the renovation we add construction time to certain tasks. So for example, the masonry shell, we had about 15% of time, not because an extension takes any much longer to lay the bricks, but because getting to the bricks to where the extension is tends to be a lot more manual labour. Obviously on the new build, what tends to happen is a lorry will drop a pallet of bricks somewhere quite near to the brickies. On an extension, a typical scenario is that the bricks and materials are delivered to the front of the property. They've then got to be carried en masse to the back of the property, and that's actually quite labour intensive and adds a significant portion of time to the construction. So for this job, I'm going to choose a new build profile. I'm going to skip the project details screen because that's essentially me typing in a name and address. I'm fairly sure that you all know how to do that. Okay, so this is our main BuildingWorks screen. On the left-hand side, we have our project tree, where you see we have the drawing, the estimate part, our build program, our reports, a bill of quantity reports, and our quotes. We also have an option for project reporting, where you can actually have multiple jobs drawn and then produce reports for several jobs. A typical example of this might be that you have 3 different houses that you're designing for one project. You can create a job for house 1, a job for house 2, and a job for house 3. Each individual house will have its own reports, but then the project report will amalgamate these all together. Very handy, obviously, for things like looking at a total profit forecast, a total cost, total cash flow, and material reports. Now, I'm going to essentially estimate by drawing my new build. Across the top menu here, we have all our estimating objects, and the majority of these are pre-drawn objects that we can essentially place on the drawing. Very little CAD skills actually required, makes life very simple. There is, however, a drawing and annotation menu which allows you to then do all the normal sort of drawing, such as drawing with lines, polylines, various shapes. And of course we have things like our horizontal and vertical and angular construction lines, which some people might like to use. Linear dimension tools are on here, and I'm going to show you how to use some of those a little bit later on. The scan and trace button, which we're not going to cover tonight, this allows you to import a third-party PDF, DXF, etc., which you can then draw over the top of for costing purposes. So this evening I'm going to be showing a new build. I will draw a very poorly designed house, as I usually do, but what I'm trying to get across is the principles of how things work and to show you some of the workings of the software. So the starting point typically is going to be with our external walls. So I'm going to click on my external wall drop down. And the first thing you can see here is that we have a wide array of external wall types. You can see we have our traditional masonry style walls. We have timber frame, double skin and single skin walls, so things like your traditional brick and timber frame used a lot in Scotland, and becoming more popular now, clad timber frame and rendered timber frame where they are single skin walls. We also have SIPs and ICF, and of course some cold outbuilding walls. So I'm going to do a brick and block wall tonight, very traditional. So I'm going to select my wall type. And once I've selected my wall type, I'm then going to choose a specification. So you see we have a couple of existing wall specifications. So anything that says it's a basic thermal performance, sorry, not an existing wall, extension wall specifications. So a basic thermal performance object, whether it be a wall, a floor, ceiling or a roof, is typically built to or specified to a U value that will meet building requirements for an extension. A high thermal performance object meets the requirements required for a new build, and then an ultra high is where a client or an architect, etc., is specifying something that's over and above the typical requirements. This may be where you're doing an offset for certain reasons. You might want to go for an ultra high thermal performance wall because for some reason maybe you can't do such a good thermal performance floor or roof, etc. Now for this evening, I'm of course going to be doing a new build, so I'm going to be looking at my high thermal performance wall. So you'll see here that it's going to be constructed with a U value of 0.17. The structural thickness of that wall is going to be 342 millimeters, so we're going to have a 140 mil cavity internally, because the makeup of that wall, following the government elemental recipe, is 200 mil leaves, 100 mil insulation with a 40 mil air gap. Now just on this object alone, I'm going to show you how we make up an assembly, how we make up a specification from assorted assemblies and rates. Now to do that, I'm going to click on this Review Specification button at the bottom of the screen. And then this gives me the makeup of my wall. Now the main area I'm going to look up here is my brick and block assembly. I can open this up, and then in here we have the various rates. So we have a rate for our brickwork, we have a rate for the unventilated cavity, a rate for where we have the insulation, a rate for our blockwork, and again for our plasterwork and decoration. Now one area we definitely want to delve into is the brick rate. So I have a metric rate here, and I could swap that out for a imperial rate. I also could swap it out for a metric or imperial reclaim brick rate. Now for this I'm going to do a new brick in a metric rate, but what I want to do is have a look at my actual brick item here, and you'll see that I'm defaulting to a 64 pence brick. You of course need to select a brick which is going to be a suitable price for the job, because of course it's going to be in keeping or what is specified. And that's very simple. I can click on my swap button, and we have a fairly large range of bricks, and we are adding a whole load more to this. And you can choose, typically you would go for a brick of a price. So if for example, if I know the brick I'm going to be using is approximately 80 pence and it's a red brick, I could choose something like, say, this Hanson Chelsea Smoked has been something that's there or thereabouts. What I do is highlight this, click OK, and I've now got an 80 pence brick built into my specification, and the rate has changed. If I did something like alter my insulation, it would automatically alter the U value for this specification, so you can alter them up or down to suit. Once you're happy with the specification, you click on Next, and we're now asked whether we're going to be building a ground floor or an upper floor. Sensibly, I'm going to start with a ground floor, and by selecting that, it means it will then take us into the footing and foundation options. The first thing it's going to ask us is what type of foundation we're going to build. I'm going to go with a trench fill, so that's a poured fill. So I'm not going to be bothering with trench blocks. If you like to use trench blocks, then you would go with one of the strip fill options. You'll see here we have options for a new build, extension or a hand dig. Essentially the new build will excavate using a JCB, An extension will excavate using the mini digger, and the hand dig will excavate using many hours of probably young burly chaps to dig holes. I'm going to go with a new build and use my JCB, which is going to be the fastest, cheapest way of excavating. We then put in the details of our foundation. So I've got 1,000 below site strip. I've got concrete pour thickness of 750, and it looks like the last foundation I put in was actually for an internal wall. So this is currently at 400. So I'm just going to adjust this to 600, which is a more typical external. In fact, actually, because this is an extra wide wall, I'm going to adjust this to 650. I can now click on Next. It's going to ask about my brick and my block cavity footing. I'm going to go with a 140. It's then asking me for my footing, is that for a shallow strip or for a trench fill? Because I've already picked a trench fill, it's worked out that I probably want to have a trench fill style footing. So I've select that, and you see that this is automatically removed all my trench blocks. Because I chose a 140, it's given me an error here to tell me that actually that was the wrong one to select, which is what I wanted to do. So I can go back here, choose my 100mm block, and you see that's now correct. So even BuildingWorks will actually even tell you if you've chosen an incorrect object by mistake. Once we're happy with that, we can go into the actual wall height. So for a ground floor wall, so if this was say a typical modern build where you had a floor to ceiling of 2400, the wall I'm going to build is actually going to be 2625 high, because that's going to make an allowance for your joist thickness of 225. And what it's also going to make an allowance for here is that internally we're not going to decorate the top 225mm of this wall, because again, that's where our floor is going to be in the building, so that's where our joists are, so we don't want plastering or decoration. So that will decorate and plaster floor to ceiling, but leave this area undecorated. Once I'm happy with that, I can click Next and have a costing option, which is would I like to make an allowance for concrete pump for a strip foundation. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to have a day delivery of one of those to do my strip foundations. Once I'm happy with that, I can now click Finish, and I'm ready to start drawing. So to do this, I click my mouse on the screen, and you see that I've got a wall ready to start building. Now the arrow defines the outside of the wall. So if I wanted to draw anti-clockwise, you'll see that that's the wrong way around. So I can simply alter this by pressing my F key, which is a hotkey, to flip. Okay. Now in this case, I actually want to draw clockwise, so I'm going to adjust that so that that's the outside of my wall. Now drawing is very simple. And now once I've placed my first wall point, I can click my right arrow, and I can say, let's go 10,000 for a 10 meter wall, and I can press enter, and then I can hit my down arrow and I can go 12 meters, and I can actually draw my house just using my arrow keys. So I can go left 3 meters, up 2 meters, and then we have a nice cheat function here, which you see there's some hotkeys on the instruction window at the bottom, and one of them is the S key for square. So instead of drawing the next two walls, I can actually just press the letter S, and it will automatically square the building off for me. Okay. You'll notice that when I've drawn walls, over on the right hand side here, extra items appear, and this is the same when you draw anything from the architectural menu. So whether it's a wall, a floor, a roof, etc., anything that you draw will prompt you for potential extra items. Now with a new build, there's probably not many of these I need, but if I was drawing walls which were teeing into an existing property, I would certainly be putting in some wall starters, which I could either draw or I could just input a quantity of, like that. Very simple. Now a couple of things have happened here. I've got a house shape. I've got a cost of £30,000, £30,269 has immediately been costed, and that has calculated all the materials, the labour and the plant for building those walls. And if I go to my 3D model, zoom out a little bit, and let's give this some texture, my ground floor is starting to take shape. Okay, so now I've got my external shell in, I can start populating the house. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump across and skip a bit. I'm going to put in my floor first of all, and then I'm going to come back to my internal walls. So I'm going to click on my floors, and you can see you have an array of typical floors. Timber suspended floor, if you draw a ground floor one, that will automatically put in your concrete oversight underneath. Assorted slabs, beam and block. We have concrete rafts if you want to do a raft and toe foundation. Basement slabs, timber cassettes if you're doing SIPs, acoustic floors, and various floor finishes. Now for this job, I'm just going to choose a concrete slab. So I'll click on that, and I now have an array of concrete slabs of different makeups and again different thermal performances. So we have slab with screed finish, insulation above slab. We have a reinforced one, and we have slabs where it has the underfloor heating pipes built into it, and we have an unreinforced and a reinforced. So I'm just going to do a plain concrete slab. Actually, no, so let's go for a reinforced concrete slab with a screed finish. I'm not going to bother with underfloor heating. I'm going to go with my high thermal performance. So again, that gives me the correct specification for a new build. If I wanted to, I could click the review specification button and go into and have a good look at that. I'm not going to do that again and again because it gets a bit tedious. I think you've already seen the principle of that, but you can check every specification that you're drawing prior to drawing to make sure that the design fulfills your requirements. I'm happy with the spec. I hit the default spec. I'm going to click Finish. And here's another cheat. I can put my cursor in the middle of my building, and you'll see that in the instruction window at the bottom I have an option to press the F key to fill. So if I press the F here, and there we go, that has just drawn the slab and estimated it with a single key press, which is quite quick. And again, over on the right hand side, it's given me some options. So would I like a concrete pump for the slab and rafts? I'm going to say yes. Do I want a concrete pump for the screed? I might be doing that by hand, so I'm going to say no, for example. And then the other option, of course, we've got is our perimeter insulation. So I can either type in a length, or probably far easier is to actually draw it. So I click on the draw button for my perimeter insulation. And this is very easy. I can very quickly just draw around the corners. And when I come to linking up my last two, again, I have some hotkey options down here. One of them is C to close. So I press the letter C, and that closes off, and you can see that that has linked my perimeter insulation, and that has now costed it. And we can see our cost is now up to £43,000. A quick look at my 3D model will show you that we now have our slab in place. Okay, now the reason I did that before the walls is that if I put my internal walls in, I would have to repeat that process because it would actually do a slab within each room. I'm cheating, and I'm obviously this will ever so slightly overestimate because there's going to be certain areas where the walls are and there's block work. If you want to be super precise, you can do your walls first, then do the slab in each room individually. So I'm going to go back now to my internal walls. Again, you see you have an array of the typical sort of walls: timber stud, metal stud, masonry walls. We have a block single skin. We have a block and cavity. That's what we're building in. If you're building one of these walls, could be maybe linked to a garage and you wanted to make it more thermal. Timber frame, block timber frame, SIPs, ICF, etc. So I'm going to do some standard block single skin walls. Again, you see we have various options. You've got 100, 140 and 215 thickness block. I'm going to go with 100, and you see that we have plastering to both sides. We also have an option for plastering, just move the mouse, to one side. Again, that would be an option where maybe you're going to put in a single skin block wall, for example, to a kitchen, and the other side of it might be a garage which is going to have an unfinished wall. I'm going to choose our top option here, so internal block wall, plastering and decoration to both sides. Click Next. Again, I'm going to go with the ground floor option, which of course will then lead me into footing and foundation. I'll go with trench fill again. I'll adjust my width of my excavation to 400. Type of footing I want, of course it's a 100mm wall, so 100mm block work will be fine. Again, the trench fill foundation. This is automatically set up for us. Again, our wall height, so depending on whether you're going to be going your joists over the top of the walls or whether you're going to be hanging them, you would adjust this either to 2400 or 2625. So I'm going to take this up to the floor height of the floor above, so I'm going to go with the 2625, and again you'll see here we have options to not decorate 225mm, this time of both sides of the wall. Click Next. Do I want a concrete pump for my foundations? Well, I've already made an allowance for pump on the external walls, so I'm going to go with the same one, so I'm not going to add another one this time. Click Finish, and I'm now ready to start drawing my internal walls. So I'm going to zoom in here and start off by following the line of this sort of entrance hallway. Click my corner point, okay, and start drawing upwards. Now you notice here that I got lucky that my justification point when I click that corner was the right way around. Sometimes you might find when you start drawing it's in the wrong position. So all I'm doing here is pressing my J key for justification, and that moves whether the drawing point is justified to the left, the right or the centre of that red line. Okay, now there is actually a PDF on the support site with a couple of pages that you can print out that's got a list of all our hotkeys for BuildingWorks, and there's a video that goes with that as well. So I can now start drawing, and I'm going to draw a very bad typical layout that I always do. Those are fairly horrendous, my layouts. I'm going to draw this, I'm going to go that way 3 meters, and I can just go to the right and link that into this wall. Because I've hit another wall, it stops that wall, but I can now carry on drawing and start drawing another wall up here. Continue doing that. As you can see here, I wanted that to start on the other side, so I simply press my J key. That moves that wall to the correct position. So it's a horrendous design. You'd never do this in real life, but I just wanted to show you some of the ways that the drawing tools work. So once you've got your awful design, hopefully yours will be better than mine. I can have a quick look at my 3D model. Oh, we can see that making shape. And again, we have some extra items with wall starters. Again, obviously with this being a new build, there'll be no requirement for wall starters. Once I've got my internal layout, I can go back to architectural. I start looking at things like doors and windows. So I'm going to start off with some doors. Again, we have a large range. For timber, we have pretty well the full Geldren catalogue. For all our PVC products and aluminium, we have the Crystal Direct catalogue, which is many thousands of shapes and sizes and designs. And the good thing about those is it means we have a big catalogue of trade prices out the box. So I'm going to start off by having, let's put a front door on, good starting point. This gives us a nice picker system, so we can start off by choosing by, for example, a width. We can then look at the sorted heights, hinge sides, what colour door we'd like. So I'm going to go with a nice anthracite grey. What kind of U value, whether you want a very good or less quality door. I'm going to go with the highest quality. This then gives me these various sort of design options. I'm going to choose this one here. ask about the reveal depth, typically 50 mil, and I can now position that on my drawing. By the way, you'll see that I'm zooming in and out. I'm just using the wheel button on my mouse to zoom in and out. Now I can position this by specific dimensions, or I can switch to my my snap mode, and basically the F7 and the F8 keys switch you between snap mode, which I'm in at the moment. F8 puts me back into dimension mode, F7 back to tab. So I'm going to put this in the middle, which is fairly sensible, and I can choose which way this door is going to open. Once I've positioned my door, the software will then say that, of course, we probably need a lintel to go above that. Gives me an option here. I'm going to go with a CB130 standard lintel. Select that. It's going to ask me whether with or without a cavity tray. I'm going to go with a cavity tray, and that's automatically put that in for me. And of course, with any lintel, it's going to ask if you want weep vents. So I'm going to say yes, 2 weep vents, please. That's automatically priced. Let's go and put a nice bifold door at the back with an aluminium. Let's have something about 3.3 wide. High quality U value. We'll go with a grey to match. And then we have a choice of openers where we go 0 left, 4 right, 1 left, 3 right, a 2 and 2, or vice versa. And basically that's when you're looking at it from the outside. So I'm going to go with a 1 and 3. So that means we've got one door we can easily open. Again, our reveal depth of 50. Click finish, and I can then position this. And I think I'm going to have this in the middle of this wall here. Once again, it's going to prompt me for a lintel, and I'm going to go with this combination heavy lintel. I could go with individual leaf lintels. In fact, actually, let's select that. So if I choose this individual one, it then actually prompts me for a second lintel. If I'd have gone with a cavity lintel on the first screen, I could then skip the second lintel. And that's then put in my lintel, and then again I've got option for weep vents, so I can put in a suitable quantity. And then next some windows. So I'm not going to do every window in the house, I'm just going to put a couple in just so you get a feel for what these are like. Again, we have PVC, softwood and hardwood. We also have things like our Veluxes and assorted dormer windows as well. The dormer windows you would use when placing dormers, they have no reveal depths, designed for going in a typical thin dormer wall. I'm going to put in some PVC windows. I'm just going to put in a couple of 1800s just to give a bit of an example. Again, a wide variety of sizes. I'm going to stick with my sort of grey theme. Oh, actually, sorry, I wanted wider than that, so let's clear that filter. Let's go for an 1800 wide. There we go. And I can choose a suitable design. Again, it will ask you dimensions, in this case the floor to top of the window height, so 2100 is fairly typical, and a reveal depth. And I can position these. It will ask me for a lintel, so I'll go with my cavity lintel again. And then once I've drawn one, if I then go and position some more of these windows, it will actually use the same lintel for the others. Okay, I shall continue with my shocking design. Again, it's asking me for weep vents. Now, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows there, so I could have done after each window I placed, done the weep vents, but what I could do is just say, there you go, 10 weep vents, that's got me covered. A quick look at our 3D. I can see how this is now taking shape. Just to reiterate, my drawings are dreadful. This is more about getting the principles and me designing the best house ever though. So the next thing I want to put in here is maybe a couple of internal doors. so we can get around the house. So we can go with internal standard doors. We'll go by a width, and we're just going to have some 838s. Just go primed, and I'm going to go with some middleweight, some medium quality doors. I can choose my lining set, so I'm going to go with a 32 by 115. As you can see, you've got a wide variety of these. And I can position some internal doors, and when I position these, because they're internal, they can open in any direction, so you just choose which way you would like them to go. Again, asking for a lintel, because it's recognised it's in a block wall. And I can just continue placing more of these. A truly shocking design. And notice at the bottom right hand corner, our price, £60,000, is automatically pricing as we go. So working our way across the menu, the next thing we obviously want is a way of getting upstairs. So I'm going to drop some stairs in there. I'm just going to put a straight staircase in, but you see we have a variety of different shapes here. And we have with either a plastered lining or with a timber apron. So I'm going to go with a plastered lining. And you specify your step length, number of risers with the staircase, things like handrail positions. Now these items here won't appear on the 3D, but of course what they will do is generate costings for you. And of course you've got an option to construct a wall to the underside, so quite typically you might have a wall under here. Something like that. Floor to floor height. As you know, we've actually set it at 2625 quite specifically earlier on. Once I've got this set, I can click Next. It's then going to ask you for a provisional sum price for a staircase allowance. Put a £500 one in. You of course put anything in here. It could be a cheap staircase, could be a very expensive staircase. You put in the figure. Now I'm ready to start drawing my staircase, so I want one to go in this corner here. And I'm going to put it right across my door, and I realise just how bad my design is. So I shall position that staircase there. I've got some extra options here if I want to make allowances, which I don't in this case. What I'm also going to do is just get rid of my door, which I've clearly drawn in a stupid place. When I go to my 3D, I've now got my staircase. Oops, there we go, positioned. Okay, as I mentioned, it won't show the wall that it builds underneath it. Now just a quick diversion onto some of the drawing aspects of this. If we go to layers, you'll see that everything we've drawn appears with their own layer. So for example, this is starting to get quite noisy here. So whilst I'm drawing around the inside, what I might want to do is hide my floor layer, for example. That cleans it up this way. The cost still there, so all we're doing is hiding it, and we can do that with all sorts of objects here. We can switch them on or off. Alternatively, we have what's called sketch mode, which I can get to by going to the drawing menu, or I can right click and just go here, switch to sketch mode. And sketch mode gives you this much more kind of estate agent look. It makes it a little bit easier sometimes for snapping because it gets rid of all the hatching, which can sometimes get in the way when you're trying to snap things. Things will snap to a hatch point as opposed to a corner example. So certainly when we're doing roofs, I find it a lot easier to use this mode. It's also a different way of presenting it. It's quite a nice, clean visual presentation. So when you're producing a design for a client, you might want to have this kind of presentation. Obviously, when you're producing a design for, say, planning, they might want this kind of look. obviously you know what they want, and you can obviously produce the drawing. Once you've drawn it, you can print it or create a PDF or whatever format, DXF, and send off to different people. And all you do is you flick between the different modes to send whichever version you'd like. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick run through of some of the more things we can do on the ground floor, and then I'm going to create an upper floor. So typical things you may also want to look at are things like your drain runs, soakaways, manholes, etc. With the drain runs, essentially let's go and put one in. You choose a specification of the drain run you want. So I'm going to go with a plastic drain run, single pipe to a new build. Specify the width and the depths and all the sorts of dimensions of your drain run. Then if we say that, let's say this is the kitchen over here. Again, you can draw this by eye. You can use dimension tool, so we could just say, let's say this is going to go out 300. Probably not far enough actually. Let's go out a bit further. Let's go out another 300. There you go, and then we can draw upwards. If I just want to now sort of draw this around the house, for example, it could be that I know I've got a link to a drain over here. I can do this by eye, and I can straighten my lines up by holding the shift key, and that will take me to the nearest 45 degree. For example. And then we can put in other drain run objects, such as, say, manholes, inspection chambers. So I can choose a type that I want. Confirm my dimensions, and then just position that on my drain. And again, I can continue the price, and I can look at my pipe fittings here, and I can say that I want a drain bend. There we go, something like an 87. I'll have one of those and make an allowance for one of those. We also have external works. You can use things like decking, fences, paving and drives, block paving, that kind of stuff. Of course, your site strip, which will of course cost you to dig out. So I can draw that around the area. Skip that for this evening. Yeah, it's just drawing another square. And you can also do things like you can put in your plumbing. So you can position your boiler, and you can then draw your heat pipe layout, your hot water pipe layout, cold water pipe, etc. So stacks. So all these items you can draw them, which will cost, and things like electrics. So what I'm going to do is just put a couple of plug sockets in just to show you a couple of handy little tips. So let's go for plug sockets. Let's go for stainless steel. You'll see there's an option here for renovation plug sockets. You would use those if you were doing work on existing property. They allow a lot more expense for the installation of plug sockets because obviously there's a lot more faff on a renovation. With a new build, obviously there's less work involved in positioning the sockets. Now what this does is it gives us two options. We can either draw our plug sockets on the drawing if we want to show where they're going to go, or we can just make a cost allowance. So we could say, I'm going to have 12 plug sockets downstairs. There we go. We've now costed all our plug sockets and the ring main for the downstairs. I can even do a mix. So it could be that I'm going to have 10, but I want to show the position of a couple. If I draw them, it will add to the quantity. So if I click draw, I'm just going to stick one in the wall over here. You'll see here that's now given us a total of 11. Okay, now some handy little drawing tips with BuildingWorks. One of them is that I might want to position a plug socket at a precise distance, or it could be a radiator or any sort of object, and you'd like to annotate the drawing so that the guys on site can actually use your drawing to help with the building. So what I can do there is I can go to my drawing annotation menu, and I can put a linear dimension onto my drawing. So I'm going to click linear dimension, click on this corner, so I've now got a line ready to go. Left arrow, 1000, so I can now put a 1 meter dimension onto my drawing. I can then get a plug socket, draw it, zoom in over here, and I can position that. Let's rotate it. There we go. So that now says to the guy on site who's doing my electrics, my plug socket needs to be 1 meter in from that corner. And you can do that with all your electrics or all your radiators, light fittings, light switches, etc. Anything where you want exact positioning, you can lay them out like that on the drawing. What that means is later on, once you've got a completed drawing, you can switch different layers on or off and actually produce different versions of the same drawing for different trades. So you could have one that shows all the electrics for your electricians, one that shows all your pipe and radiator and boiler layout for, say, your plumbers, for example. You can have one that's got none of those details, and it's all the details such as all your wall dimensions for, of course, the guys who are doing your groundworks and all the masonry shell. And what we can do for that is click on a wall, click the dimension wall button at the top, and that will automatically dimension your wall for you. Just do that again on this top wall, so I'm going to click my wall, hit my dimension wall button, and there we go, that's dimensioned my wall. And I can do the same with my internal walls as well. Obviously making the drawing far more useful for the guys on site. Okay. We also have options for positioning things like bathrooms and kitchens. We use some sort of basic rates for those. Quite often, though, you may want to just estimate those as provisional sums, and alternatively, you can actually position things like baths, sinks, etc., kitchen units using our non-estimated symbol library. Now, to get that, I can right-click, go to my symbol browser, and in here we have an array of pre-drawn symbols that you can then put on the drawing. So, for example, we have things like furniture. So I'm going to put an array of beds, chairs, for example. Under our plumbing, we've got all sorts of things like our sanitary ware bathrooms. So we've got a variety of different baths, toilets, etc. So if you want to give a visual representation, but without actually giving a cost, because you're probably going to provisional sum these items, you can use these objects, position them on your drawing to give a visual so that the client can obviously get an idea of scale. And we also have in here some of the external objects. So for example, under our landscape, we have various sort of trees, hedges. We also have trees in elevation if you want to have elevations, so again you get an idea of scale. More trees in plan. For those of you familiar with AutoCAD, these will probably look quite familiar. They're very typical sort of AutoCAD type cells. And then various sort of miscellaneous external things. For some reason we have a schooner in here if you're building a house for someone who likes to yacht a lot. A couple of pools, etc. Kitchen appliances, sinks, kitchen units, etc. Okay, so what I'm going to say there is that I'm happy with my my ground floor. If you were living there, you probably won't be. It's a dreadful design, but for demonstration purposes, it's looking okay. So what I need to do now is create a ground floor level, because the level tool is what we use to create subsequent stories within the building. So I go to my Views in 3D menu, and I click on my Level button. This is going to ask me for a level name, so I'm going to keep this sensible and call it my ground floor. Base height of 0, a level height of 2625. Of course, we specified that earlier on, so we need to make sure we match it. Click OK. It's going to ask me for a reference point, so I'm going to click an external corner. I'll do there. And then we'll go around my building, and that now gives me my ground floor level. I can now click on my ground floor level, and I get a copy button. I click on the copy button and I'm prompted to either use a reference point or an arrow key. So very simple, I'm going to go right arrow. That pops up my copy level dialog, so it wants to know what this is called. So this is going to be my first floor. It wants to know what the base height is. Well, that's 2625, so of course this will sit on top of the floor below. And the level height here will will actually automatically draw and cost the walls for my first floor. So I'm going to set these to 2400. And to tell it's an additional floor, so what that will do is it will optionally copy my doors and windows. If this was going to be an attic level, we would create a level height of 0, and we would tell it was an attic floor, and what that does is it strips out all the doors and windows, because of course in an attic there won't be any, there's going to be a roof instead. So once I've got this set, I'm going to click Next. It's going to ask me what I want to copy. So it's taken out the doors, sensibly. It's left my windows in place. I'm going to leave those all in place because, of course, I can delete or move them afterwards. I'm also going to temporarily leave my internal walls in place so that I can use them to create my floor layout. Okay, so that's my second floor. You'll see our price has jumped up to 92,000. And if I have a look at my 3D model, I now have a 2-story building. Okay, the obvious that I'm missing at the moment is a floor. And one thing you also notice here is it's brought the stairs across, but these are uncosted stairs. So this is just a symbol, because this obviously gives me a guideline for where I want to put my trimmers. So let's put my floor in. So I'm going to click on Architectural, Floors, a timber suspended floor. Of course, it's not a ground floor one. I'm going to want an upper floor, 400 centres with insulation between members. Click on Next. I've got these two options here. So if I choose any shape, that allows me to go around the strange shaped room, or rectangular just to fill a square. I'm going to go with any shape because that gives me another clever hotkey. I put my cursor in this room, and then I can press the V key if I want my joists to go vertically, or the H key if I want my joists to go horizontally. So if I go to this room, I'm going to go V. I can now right click, previous command, add floor. I can go V again, right click, add floor. This time I'm going to go horizontal, right click, add floor, horizontal again. Okay, and now in this room, I'm going to right click, add floor. Now I'm not going to use my hotkey because I want to draw around my stairs. So I'm going to actually do this by drawing around the perimeter of the room and my stairs. Close this off. And again, I get offered some extra items. And the main one, of course, I want here is some joist trimmers to the upper floor. So I want to draw those. Okay, of course you would actually probably double up on those. Okay. What we might have even done there is actually, when we drew this, is actually put the trimmers in first and then alter this layout here. If you do draw your joists in and you realise you've done it the wrong way around, you can actually click on them and simply toggle the direction, which is quite handy. But again, you notice on the right hand side we have an array of other items you might want to put in, like end straps, etc. Solidify our floor. Now once I've put our floor in, I'm going to go to Layers, temporarily hide my floor, because that means I can now select my doors and walls that I've copied, and I can get rid of these. Because I don't want these internal walls upstairs. Okay, don't want those ones either. And it also means I'm now ready to draw my internal wall layouts. Now, I'm not going to do that because we're a bit pressed for time, but essentially it's exactly the same as drawing it downstairs, but you'd probably be using timber stud walls. Okay, and we can now see, there we go, there's our layout. So we have our upper floor ready to put our timber floors in, and you can also see the opening where we have decided it would be sensible to leave space for you to walk up the stairs. Okay, so to finish our house off, we need to keep the rain out, so we need to put a roof on. So if we go to roofs, we have a large array again. So we have an attic cut roof. So if you were going to be building an attic, you would actually use this option, because what that does is on the extra items on the right hand side, it gives you all the additional items for an attic, such as upstands, steels, collared ceilings and sloping ceilings. You've got a vaulted cut roof and your standard cold cut roof with a flat ceiling, and then we have truss equivalents and things like SIPs. Flat roofs, you've got cold and warm, outbuilding roofs, and then we've also got these items here. So if you were doing a renovation job, you can actually draw a roof and it will automatically cost it for retiling just by using that option. We have a roof refurbishment option where basically you draw that roof, and partway through the process it actually asks you for the percentages of each part of the roof that you need to replace, whether it's joists, battens, tiles, felt, etc. And you can put in the percentages to be replaced, and it will then automatically cost it for you. Now for today, I'm just going to do a standard cold cut roof with a flat ceiling, so I'm going to choose this option here. I then of course go to the centres that I want, so I'm going to go with 400, and then my thermal value, so I want a high thermal performance for a new build. Click on next. It's then going to ask us the tiling system, because of course this has a massive impact on the cost. So I'm going to go with a nice double Roman, fairly common, because it could be a Marley modern, that kind of thing, slates, etc., and then of course small clays and such like. It's going to ask us for our fixing system. Of course, I'm going to go with a dry fix, which is the modern requirement. What shape of roof I want, so I'm just going to go with a nice clean apex roof here. Our pitches, our overhangs, and a very handy thing is it gives you an option to put in the costs for certain items. So for example, our double Roman tiles that I put in, are they £1 each? Well, I could actually say no, I'm going to be buying these for £1.50 each, because obviously roof tiles are very variable in price. So this gives you an option to punch those figures in so you get the right costing to start with. Once I've done that, I can click finish, and I'm ready to start drawing my roof. So I'm going to have an apex on here that's going left to right. Okay, so that means I want to draw my gable end first. So the instruction window down the bottom is telling me what to do. So, come out of the mode, hit the escape button, don't do that. Let's do that again. There we go. Don't hit the escape key in the middle of what you're doing. There we go. So click on the new wall that the roof is on. There we go. Click a wall. And what that's doing is that's saying this is the wall plate height that we want to relate the roof to. Once I've done that, I'm now ready to start clicking my corners. So I want my first corner and my second corner, and that's going to say that this is the gable end wall, and then my third corner will then create our apex length. Okay, that's now put a roof on, and again it's giving us our extra items on the right hand side, so I can do things like putting in rainwater goods, extra purlins, binders, etc., a loft hatch, and of course the most obvious one is we probably want a ceiling. So I'm going to click the draw button. And again, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to hover my mouse over here, and I'm going to use the F button. And there we go. That's going to fill my entire roof. If I want this to go a different direction, I can toggle them. If I wanted to, I could actually draw, using the lines to draw a roof layout, if I did want to have any sort of differential in directions of joists if it was a very large house. That's my ceiling put in place. What I do, of course, need is an extra bit of roof over here. So this is very simple because I can right-click. Now my previous command was add ceiling, so unfortunately I can't use that again, but that's okay because down here I have an option for already used specifications. There's my roof. There we go. Your roof 1, I want to use the same specification, so it goes straight into the same setup. Again, I can click a wall, corner, corner, and this time I'm going to press the letter T, and that will allow me to T into this eaves line and create our valley. Go to our 3D model, and hey presto, there is our house. With our costings, etc. Okay, so that's a general run through of most of the drawing side of things. Just a couple of bits of extras to show you. Let's just create ourselves a front elevation of the property. This is quite easy. I'm going to draw the elevation. Again, it's telling me what to do here. To click on the wall, so I want to base it on the front of the house. Where do I want to view from? So I want to view from outside the property. How far back do I want to view? So I need to make sure I go beyond the middle of the house, so I get the ridge line in. If I'd have been sensible, I would have probably used this on the other side. But I can actually, as you see here, if I move the cursor over here to make sure I'm beyond my ridge line, it's actually positioning it correct over here. So there's my depth. And then how far to the left, how far to the right. It wants a reference point for my elevation, so I'm going to use that one, and let's just zoom over here. Create the elevation for all levels, yes. And there we go, it's created my elevation. And I can then, of course, this starts off as a symbol. I can click on it and explode it, and I can then modify it so I can draw in more lines, hatch it, etc. Okay, and of course you can draw as many elevations as you like. Right, so that's a sort of quick run through from the drawing side of things. So just to show you on the estimate perspective now, if I click on open up the estimate here, you can actually see all the objects we've drawn. We can actually see the details of what's been estimated. Okay, on the estimate menu itself, you can also manually estimate objects instead of drawing them, so you can go through here. And what this does give you is the option to estimate things you can't draw, such as fire stops, prelims, so design costs, insurance costs, site appraisals, that could be test holes, etc. Travel costs, very major costs that a lot of builders don't take into account, prelims, sundry plant, and of course you can make allowance for management staff, so you could have site foremen, etc., contracts managers, all that kind of people. Option for subcontract quotes, and provisional sums, which is in the new version, which I'm not demonstrating tonight because it's not quite ready, but it's coming out any day now, and that will have a provisional. That's actually just to the right of the chimneys, has a provisional sum option. Also in here you can manage your markup. So you can split up, well, we actually split these up, so you have an overhead markup. For a typical small building company, overhead markup is typically 15%. If you are a slightly larger company, so you're building in things like your management staff costs, then these tend to drop to around 8 to 10%. And on the right hand side, this is your net profit setting, so you put in how much money the company actually wants to make as a final net profit. When you look at reports that talk about profit, unless it actually says the word overhead, it's talking about your actual net profit that you're making. Another quick option here, or handy function I'm just going to show you here, is that we have an estimate checker. And what this does is it flags up things in red to point out something you might have missed. So if I go into my estimating calculators here, it's going to tell me that on my brick and high performance wall, I didn't do any sundries. Now I know that was for things like wall starters and such like, which I might need an extension. So in this case I can go, thanks very much for the reminder, but actually that's okay. I can say that's completed. My drain runs, I didn't do any sundries. I may well have missed out some corner bend pipes, etc. So what I could do is either open the drawing or open the estimating calculator, go back in, put my corner bends, and then when I come back in here, that'll be ticked off as ready. And so I just run through my reds to make sure that I have actually fulfilled anything and not forgotten anything, because of course if you're costing, you don't want to be forgetting items, because of course that can then bite you in the back pocket, especially if you're the developer, because of course there's nobody else to offset that cost to. So the next thing we'll have a quick look at is the build program, and this will actually calculate a Gantt chart for the duration of your build phases based on the amount of labourers and of course the work that we've estimated through our drawing. You can specify a start job for the project, so we could say we're going to be cracking on this in September. You can then quickly whiz through all your labourers to specify how many of these gangs. So you might have, you've got a whole load of roof tilers to hands. You're going to have a 2 and 2 gang, for example, etc. Specify how many of these labourers you've got. Click finish, and this will then calculate automatically for you your build time. Okay, let's just shrink this across a bit. So that is your build program. And you can view this different looks. You can do it day, week, or you can do monthly if you want to compress it down a bit. And you can export this in either a graphical format, or you've got a Microsoft Project XML format if you wanted to put it into some sort of other project management software. Okay. Now this is just a simple Gantt chart, just to give you basic layout. You can manually extend build phases, so you can move them longer or shorter. So you might run an hour. You might be all the guys going on holiday for a week, so you're going to add an extra week to the masonry shell, and that will automatically move everything behind it onwards. This isn't a full project management program, so it won't do things like automatic rescheduling, etc., task assignments, that kind of thing. There's going to be a project management module released next year, which will allow you to do all the kind of project management module tasks that you'd like to do. Now, one beauty of this is that once we have done the build program, that means that when we go to reporting, all our date-based reports now have a timeline. So, for example, if we look at cash flow, because we have a build program, this will always pop up, by the way, until we tell it not to. Because we have a build program, we can now actually have a cash flow which will show where we have outlays for costs for materials, labour, plant, etc. Okay. If you are a developer, of course, this shows you when you're going to need financing from yourself. If you're working for a third-party client, this, of course, will then give you a guidance for when you want payments from them if you're doing a stage payment plan. You can also do things like, for example, a profit forecast. So this actually shows you where you're going to be making net profit as you're going through the build. This is obviously quite beneficial if you're doing quite a few jobs. If you've got any capital expenditure for the company, you can actually see at what point you've got enough cumulative total profits from a job to actually enable you to buy a new digger or a new van or whatever. Maybe you could be spending money on a new website, advertising, etc. So it just gives you money, an idea of when you can afford things or when you can't afford things. Report-wise, all the data that you want is in here. Now, we've got about 50 or so default reports. The amount of reports you can have is almost infinite. Basically, any piece of data that's in BuildingWorks can be reported on here simply by dragging fields in from over here. So, for example, I could drag in my build phase name, so I can actually relate build phases to this time scale here. So I've now made a new version of the report so I can see where I'm making my profit and what it's related to from a build phase perspective, etc. The cost report will give you a report by build phase, and I can change that. I can take my build phase out and I can do build phase by element or build phase by cost by date. So you can manipulate these reports, and any that you make, once you've made a report and you want you like, save it to the library. It then appears in your list in the format that you want. You can do things like drilling down into specific areas, so you can look at electrician's costs, for example, joinery costs, etc. You can look at a labour task list. So this is telling me who I need and when I need them. So if you're managing, if you're a project management company or a developer and you're using a lot of subcontractors, this will actually tell you when you need those subcontractors on site. So again, giving you a bit of a schedule for ordering those people in. We have various different ways of looking at labour used. So this will show you where different labourers have been used by the different build phases, etc. Of course, the biggie, materials used. This actually gives you your full material order list. You can do it by build phase, or I can drag my build phase out, drop it over here a second, and that now just gives me a complete list. Very handy if you're doing cost analysis, or if I bring my build phase name back in. Okay, what you can do is export this into Excel. You can then actually, by using the build phases and your build program, actually create an order schedule. So in Excel, you can take these details, round these figures up and down to suit, and over on the right-hand side, you can actually then maybe add in some delivery dates, give that to your merchant, and then get your merchant to manage all your deliveries for you. Obviously, this has a benefit of you can plan ahead for all your materials. It also means you can do things like reduce the amount of time you're going to the merchant. So a lot of construction companies waste a lot of time by going to the merchant multiple times a week. To give a very rough analogy, you don't go to Asda every night to buy food. You probably go once a week or once a fortnight to save time. Okay. Now we do have a material order schedule, in BuildingWorks. The only slight issue with that is, of course, that we have an assumed delivery schedule for every product. That may vary from supplier to supplier, and of course certain products, like for example in the last few years, things like insulation, timber and concrete products, of course, have had massively variable delivery dates due to shortages, so you can't always rely on this. So that's why I would probably myself use a build phase schedule, so you can tell the merchants when you want things delivering. They can then deal with when they need to order it in to meet your delivery schedule. Okay. Another very handy report, as I mentioned before, profit forecast. Just going back to that, that shows you as and when you're making profit. I've now got this by build phase. Let's take that out. Of course, it shows you a total profit. If you're working for a third-party client and you're doing them a quote, if they're trying to negotiate with you, you can see how much net profit you've got. That then gives you an idea of how much you can negotiate. Okay, and then this final report at the bottom I'm going to show you here is sales price, including our profit and overhead. So this gives you a good idea of your final price. Now obviously we've not done all the details on new build here, so that probably looks a little bit cheap. Once we put in provisionals and obviously a lot more walls and detail, this is probably getting closer to around the £200,000 mark, I would have thought. Now for those of you who require NRM or Bill of Quants types reports, the QS edition of BuildingWorks covers this with our 2 Bill of Quants reports. So we have an elemental report. Okay, and you have various different formats of this. So you have a summary one, a condensed or expanded one, branded or unbranded, and you can have it with no prices or with price including profit, etc. So if I do this option here, and you'll see this gives us elemental by rate. Okay, this is quite handy if you're tendering out to somebody. Well, the other one we've got is a work section report. Now this is one that you would probably use by having a no price one, and that gives you a different sort of work sections without a price. This is the sort of one that you can export into Excel or Word or PDF or whatever you want and send it out to subcontractors so that they can tender back to you. Okay, and finally, the customer quote. So we've got a few formats we've made. Again, you can make lots and lots of different formats to customer quote. Once you've tweaked one to suit yourself, you save it and then you have your own versions. So if I just show you a very an abbreviated one, so this is quite a short one. Now I didn't put any client details in at the start of this job, so if I'd have filled in those, they would appear at the front. Your company logo you put on here. You then have a dear sir or madam introductory letter, and then we go into a quote by build phase. You can also do a quote by, say, specifications of elements, so you can show it by walls, by doors, by roof, etc. Build phase is the most traditional one, but we have other options if you want. And you can see here I've got a very clean one that's just showing the cost of each element. You could, if you want to, take those out and literally just have a build phase with a cost. You can even switch the individual costs off if you want. So you can see here that's quite an abbreviated quote. If I go one here that's got a lot more detail, this is the other end of the spectrum. So you can see here we're going to a lot more detail. We're breaking down with a list of materials, quantities and costs. Okay. And the beauty of BuildingWorks is that you can actually produce both versions of this quote for one client. And this could be the version of the quote that you actually knock on their door and you go through with them and you show them, and because it gives you the ability to actually demonstrate and explain all the costs. So if they're asking why does this cost so much, you can actually show them exactly why each part of the job costs so much. If you don't get the customer signature there and then, you take this quote away, and the abbreviated one that I showed you earlier is the one that you can leave behind. So of course leaving you with much lower risk, because of course there's always a fear that they may wave this under another builder's nose and ask them to run off and quote on your quote to beat you. Okay, so once you've got the quote that you want, I'm actually just going to switch to the abbreviated one again, just to otherwise I'll be scrolling for a long time. Keep going. So we have a summary page, which again is optional. And then you have an acceptance letter, 2 copies, one for you, one for your client. And then down at the bottom we have a blank terms and conditions page, and this has been set up so that what you can do is if you've already got a terms and conditions document, you can come into here and get your document, paste it in, and it will automatically appear there. And there we have it, that's BuildingWorks. So we have literally gone from design to quote to materials list, NRM reports, all the data that you require in one fell swoop. So thanks very much for all those who have attended this evening. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to get in touch with us at BuildingWorks. The telephone number is 0117 916 7880. That's 0117 916 7880. Feel free to visit the BuildingWorks website, which is getbuildingworks.com, or just Google BuildingWorks, or you can email me direct. My email address is ed@getbuildingworks.com. So other than that, thank you very much for attending, and I'll hopefully talk to you all soon.